I'm Adrian, and welcome to another episode of Fighting Skills. In this series, we take an in-depth look at a character's fighting style, not in terms of how many they know, but how effectively they handle themselves in a fight. In other words, how complete of a fighter the character in question is. In this episode, we will be analyzing The Punisher from the Marvel Netflix series. This video assumes that you've seen every episode with The Punisher on Netflix, as well as his corresponding fighting styles video. If you haven't seen his fighting styles video, it's in the description below and on the fighting styles playlist. If you haven't seen his Netflix series or appearance on Daredevil series, I highly recommend you do, as they are extremely well done and entertaining. I will keep spoilers to a minimum and won't dwell too much on the specifics surrounding each fight we take a look at unless it's absolutely necessary. So take this as your spoiler warning. In order to keep things as objective as possible, in this series each fighter will receive a fighting skills rating which is comprised of several categories that all have a weighted value. Those categories are Martial Arts Prowess, which accounts for 28% of the overall score. Situational Awareness, which accounts for 12% of the overall score. Technique, Strength, and Speed, which comprises 15% of the overall score. Defense, which accounts for 15% of the score. Use of Superpowers, which accounts for 10% of the score. Conditioning and Stamina is worth 10%, and Intelligence, which is worth 10%. For an in-depth explanation for each of these categories, as well as a couple disclaimers, please refer to the Batman fighting skills video available in the description below. As explained with plenty of detail in his fighting styles video, the Punisher primarily relies on the CQC system known as the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program. According to the Marines' official mission statement, it's a whole Marine program which emphasizes a complete development of a professional warrior. It's designed to improve the warfighting capability of individual Marines and units. It's not a sport, but a specifically designed distinctively weapons-based system. So what does this mean for his skills in martial arts? The Punisher's combat MO is to be as lethal as possible. This is why most of his disarms end in bone breaks, getting shot, or any other violent end. He has plenty of martial arts skills to get out of any situation with common thugs or criminals. The prison hallway fight he has in Daredevil is probably the best example of this, as in a span of only a few minutes, he decimates his enemies with neck cracks, disarms, and knife attacks. During his fight in the diner in Daredevil Season 2, he also displays how excellently he weaves in and out of combat using weapons and hand-to-hand attacks. These skills were also seen during the impressive hallway fight that he has in Season 1 of The Punisher. And when a more stealthy approach is needed, he is more than equipped to handle this kind of fight as well, no doubt relying on his extensive training in the Marine Corps. He even performs admirably against multiple opponents, the best example of this being when he's surrounded by Jigsaw's men. However, this is where an important distinction comes when discussing the Punisher's fighting style. There is no question about whether or not he's a successful warrior, a man who will more often than not beat the odds and win. But how he goes about doing this is very different from the other heroes we've seen on this series before. The Punisher has skills in martial arts, but they are not as developed as they are with someone like Daredevil or Captain America. And aside from a few holds and double-leg takedowns, he hasn't shown much knowledge of ground combat like Captain America. Furthermore, the Punisher really has no kicking game, besides a few low kicks and the go-to But other than that, none of the athleticism in Captain America or Daredevil can be seen. He compensates this with exceptional weapons training, situational awareness, a unique method of defense, and strength and speed, which we will discuss in much more detail. But purely as a martial artist, he is severely lacking. This is why he was repeatedly outskilled by Daredevil. He is hit left and right during the first match and wins because he pulls out a gun. During the second match on the rooftop, he's once again outskilled, and wins because he throws Daredevil and himself through a window. When he gets a proper rematch with him again on a ship, he has zero chance against a fully focused, uninjured Daredevil. Daredevil outskilled him in terms of martial arts time and time again. When he fought against Russo at the end of Punisher Season 1, things were pretty much even. As a matter of fact, he got stabbed in the forearm and was about to get killed until he found a piece of a mirror, stabbed Russo, and proceeded to push him against that mirror. When he fought the bodybuilder in the gym, who is played by the retired MMA fighter Keith Jardine in case you didn't know, he was outskilled. None of his kicks, grappling maneuvers, or punches worked on this guy at all. He won that fight because he took a weight disc and repeatedly slammed it into the guy. All of this is to say that the Punisher can end up with a victory, but it's usually not because of his exceptional skills in martial arts. He relies on other aspects, which we will now analyze much more closely. The category that probably best encapsulates the Punisher's skills is his situational awareness. Not only is the Punisher incredibly attuned to the world around him, he has an unprecedented knowledge of turning everything around him into a potential weapon. For example, during this short encounter, he immediately uses a cover available to him. That's a good use of the environment. At a construction site, he uses a mallet as a weapon. During this hallway firefight, he quickly spins around and takes out a guy that wasn't even remotely in his current field of view. He either heard him or remembered him from before. In any case, that displays an extraordinary sense of being aware of his surroundings. In one of his aforementioned fights with Daredevil, despite being outskilled, he came out victorious. And why was that? Because he grabbed Daredevil and launched himself through a window. Granted, that was insanely risky to do as he could have severely hurt himself as well, but it worked. Daredevil still had not fully healed up from the gunshot, and now the impact left him totally helpless. It does need to be pointed out that earlier in that fight, he was caught completely unaware by Daredevil's surprise attack. Daredevil even managed to do the same thing during their first rooftop brawl. During this chase, he used a fire hose to escape. His situational awareness does falter a bit in the fight at the gym. He's surprised push kicked from behind him and is also put in a hold where he's wide open to receiving attacks from more opponents. However, he quickly turns the situation around by using the environment around him to help him win the fight. He uses dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, and weight discs to smack around his opponents. Even the previously mentioned seemingly insurmountable bodybuilder is taken down by a few disc hits to the face. During his excellent bathroom fight, he uses a literal bathroom sink to end it. Frank consistently uses a very important element in the Marine Corps martial arts program, and that is using weapons of opportunity, or an improvised weapon. Remember that a weapon doesn't necessarily have to be a knife or a gun. It can be virtually anything if you have the right skills and know-how. As a matter of fact, the Marine Corps combat instructors have a saying, which is one mind, any weapon, and Frank absolutely embraces this mindset. So how does a Punisher fare in situational awareness? Frank Castle scores 10 out of 12 points. He is acutely aware of the environment around him, and although sometimes people can get the drop on him, he more often than not uses the environment against his opponents to win. And how does a Punisher score in martial arts prowess? He receives 20 out of 28 points. Although he has the skills necessary to eliminate practically any henchman, he doesn't show knowledge of complex and harder to execute techniques. Furthermore, once he faces someone who is stronger or has more skills than he does, he needs to rely on other things that are not martial arts to have a fighting chance. Now seems like a perfect time to take a look at the Punisher's defense, conditioning, along with his strength and speed as they all influence one another. Frank is aware of all the best disarms in the world. It doesn't matter what weapon you present him with, he will disarm it and use it against you in the most brutal way possible. Even if you're trying to stab him, he'll find a way to counter your attack and make it hurt, if not outright kill you. His fight in the bathroom is a great example of using his defensive skills as he has to defend himself against several attackers in a closed space. During the CQC hallway fight, he blocks and counters, and during the bathroom brawl, he defends himself perfectly from this attack. For more info on this particular move, check out his fighting styles video. However, the Punisher relies on the old saying, the best defense is a good offense. This is because he's extremely prone to tanking hits, either by multiple foes, Daredevil himself, crazed weightlifters, or anybody else that stands in his way. And if you think tanking so many hits would put him out of commission, you'd be mistaken, as more often than not, it's part of his strategy. He tanks the hits enough times, and then comes up with a suitable counterattack. Whether it's throwing him through a window, hitting him with a disc, or just slamming them into a bathroom stall, the Punisher will get the job done. He always finds the necessary speed and strength to finish the fight. This relates to the man's abnormally high conditioning and stamina for a normal human being, along with his extremely high pain tolerance. It doesn't matter if he gets beaten by a man with a gun taped to his hand, or brutally interrogated by a gangster, he keeps getting up and fighting. When Daredevil wasn't paying attention after striking him with said magnum, the Punisher got right back up. After being beaten for hours by gangsters and still being in good enough health to make himself laugh, he takes a drill to the foot. Any normal man would have been in a tremendous amount of pain, but not the Punisher. He literally walks it off as he goes on to blast the man who captured him. Sure, he gets a little tired afterwards and does need to take a breather before Daredevil bursts in as backup. But he's back in the game moments later. His strength and speed diminished a bit, but not enough to make a huge difference. From a martial arts standpoint, his higher stamina and conditioning than Daredevil's does make sense. Daredevil is constantly using extremely difficult maneuvers, and all in rapid succession, and more often than not needs to fight a seemingly unending horde of enemies. It makes sense for him to get tired. With the Punisher, he has a much less strenuous fighting style. Low kicks, few punches, tanking tons of hits, and then delivering a brutal counterattack that usually ends the fight. He doesn't have to worry about leaving his enemies breathing either, like Daredevil does. Due to his marine training, he's also had to endure an extremely rigorous conditioning and stamina regimen. These men run, fight, and train for miles and hours each day, giving them peak condition. In his epic prison fight, the Punisher is literally stabbed in the forearm, but he keeps going. He takes the knife out of his forearm and uses it on his enemy. the speed and strength he demonstrated throughout this fight was astounding as well. During his fight with Russo, he is once again stabbed in the forearm, and does lose some strength and speed, but still keeps fighting. However, he is not superhuman. He does have a breaking point for his conditioning and pain tolerance. After being tortured, he did need to recover for a bit. After falling through a window, he was definitely on his last legs. He also tanks one too many hits with this guy. He takes a disc, a shovel, and a window to the head and is almost choked out by a chain, severely losing strength and speed, but he once again pulls through by striking him with a bigger object. Therefore, in the category of defense, the Punisher scores 9 out of 12 points. He's familiar with several blocks and counters and can handle himself extremely well against multiple enemies. And although he does have a predisposition for tanking hits, he uses the knowledge gathered from these attacks to assess the best counterattack. In conditioning and stamina, the Punisher scores 9 out of 10 points. Due to his low energy fighting style and his tip-top marine conditioning, the Punisher excels in this category, only exhibiting signs of fatigue in extreme circumstances, such as getting stabbed. In technique, strength, and speed, the Punisher scores 14 out of 15 points. He displays remarkable physical fitness throughout his fights, enough to tank multiple hits, and like his stamina, only briefly loses some strength and speed during extenuating circumstances. Moving on to the superpowers category, we are dealing with Frank Castle. He's an ex-Marine with no actual superpowers to speak of. He was never in a toxic goop accident, he wasn't bitten by a radioactive animal, he didn't get blasted with gamma rays, nothing like that. However, just like Batman and Iron Man don't actually have literal superpowers, they have superior abilities that make them superheroes. And in the case of Frank Castle, besides his abnormally high pain tolerance, his most observable skill, that talent which makes him practically superhuman, is his insane skill with weapons. He is a marksman and rarely, if ever, misses his target, whether it's firing one sniper bullet from miles away and hitting his target, or if it's just firing a pistol across a parking lot, or taking out dozens of men in a cramped hallway or a small base. He will always find a way to achieve his mark. His skill with weaponry isn't even limited to guns either, as he's also excellent with not only defending and disarming the knife, but wielding it as well, perhaps most aptly demonstrated during his prison fights. In use of superpowers, he receives a full 10 out of 10 points. Although he has no literal superpowers, the Punisher never hesitates to use his seemingly superhuman weapon skills during battle. Intelligence, as discussed in the Daredevil and Captain America episode, doesn't just mean their literal IQ, but how well they perform in the battlefield and how well they use their emotions. In other words, it's about their emotional intelligence as well. In the case of the Punisher, although he's typically full of rage, this somehow fuels how effective he is in a fight. His emotions typically don't impair his judgment at all, except for one crucial moment, when he hesitates to fire at Russo when he had the chance, resulting in Russo killing more people. This was only a pointless delay, as Frank does finally kill him later. When it comes to making tactical decisions, the Punisher also does waver a bit. He is intelligent enough to take out an entire family of gangsters from afar, outsmart a planned tactical trap against him by the cops, and even preemptively store a razor in case he's kidnapped, and booby trap what the gangsters want. But he's also the same guy who casually walks around with a shotgun in a hospital to shoot his target and doesn't even break into a jock to try to catch him. He also somehow can't see Daredevil's third choice of shooting his chains when he's captured. Therefore, in intelligence, the Punisher scores an 8 out of 10 points. He uses his primary emotions of anger and rage to fuel his excellent performance on the battlefield, but his emotions did work against them when he spared Russo. He also more often than not makes exceptional tactical choices. So in conclusion, what is a Punisher's fighting skills rating? Out of 100 possible points, the Punisher from the Marvel Netflix series receives a fighting skills rating of 80! I'd like to thank each one of my Patreon members as their contribution helped in the making of this video. If you'd like to contribute and appear in the credits in the future, my Patreon page is Godzilla Rex, and it's in the description below. What other fighter should I analyze next? Subscribe, let me know in the comments below, and see you next time.